Welcome to the Better Two podcast. I'm your host, Donna. Today's guest is Grammy nominated, Golden Globe nominated Ian Dench from the band EMF. We talk about those nominations. We also talk about EMF and we talk about addiction. Not that he had a problem, but he had a time where he was super stressed and had to find something to fix it. And he did. So we talk about that and their upcoming tour, EMF's upcoming tour, that starts June 14th. So tune in. Hi, Ian. How are you doing today?
Hi, Donna. I'm doing great, thank you.
I am
How are
so
you?
I'm doing good. I am doing good. The one thing I want to talk to you about before you change your setting a little bit, your picture behind you was really awesome looking. Um, and I had a question about that. Is that a private thing that you've gotten, or what's a little bit about that design? And you can put it back down. I just was curious.
It's a very old photograph. I can't remember who it's by, but it's probably from the 40s because it's one of those really squishy dresses, and it's a girl. She just sort of like she's like bowing and she's swishing her dress up at the same time, and it's just so beautiful.
Hmm.
We just had it blown up and um so we can put it on our wall.
I love it because it also, I mean, depending on how you interpret it, it also, she's taking a bow, or is she in that moment of grief? Is she in a moment of loss? I mean, there's many
Right?
ways to interpret it, and it's being gracious if she's taking a bow, or it could be something else. You never know, and that's
Or
the
she
great
could
thing
be
about art.
isn't it lovely? And it's she could be in the moment of a dance. Maybe she's
Hmm.
something's happening. It's lovely. It's open to interpretation,
Exactly, and that's what makes art great. So yeah,
isn't it? Isn't
yes,
it? It's not. You don't want to define it too much because you need to leave something for people to, to put their own lives into it.
exactly. And one day you may look at it and see something, and one day you may look at it and see something else.
Right?
And that's the
It
same.
was Leonardo da Vinci.
No, go ahead.
Sorry,
No, go ahead.
Donna.
Go, go, go.
Leonardo da Vinci um, used to love looking at marks on a wall. He said, he'd see things in the marks on a wall, and I think that's a lovely thing. I think I don't want to compare myself to Leonardo da Vinci too much, but I love just making noise on the guitar, and then sort of things come out of it. It's like, it's just funny how we started right on the creative process, haven't we?
Well, and that's what I was going to say. It's the creative mind because the creative mind, whether it be music, writing, art, you always expand on something. You may write something one day, a lyric or a riff on a guitar, and the next day it changes. And I know you write songs as well because yes, you're Grammy nominated and Golden Globe nominated, and you've worked with Beyonce and Shakira. I read up on you, of course, but but I mean, this is diverse. This is things that, you know, you're writing for other people, so they're going to interpret your stuff in a different way altogether. Even though your intent is there in the lyric and your intent is there in the song, they're still going to make it their own.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. Yeah, but it's nice to do something together, like to find a communal intent and you know, I love collaborating with people um and James and I from EMF always had a really great chemistry because we felt the way each other was going. We loved sharing that journey, trying to find where we were going. We loved guitars and we loved electronic keyboards and those great sort of English indie bands from the 80s like the Smiths and the Echo and the Bunnymen, but we also loved the hip hop that was coming from the States like Public Enemy and De La Soul and so it was like it's like mixing it all up together and seeing what comes out um and I think it was lovely when you do it with somebody that you share a connection with, because then that communal intent is greater than the sum of the parts, I think. And
Well, and the thing is, you also get to expand the ideas because, I mean, I know for me as a writer, sometimes I'll have somebody that I'll talk my story through, and it's like you may see something, but then that person will give you just another little tweak, and off your mind goes.
yeah, yeah, right. It keeps
And
shifting that perspective.
exactly. And as a musician, it's the same thing. I mean, you may have the riff down, but somebody will come in and say, "Well, wait, if you tweak it over here just slightly, wouldn't
Mm.
it be?"
Yeah,
So, which brings us kind of to, let's go back to the past for a second and talk about your biggest hit, which was unbelievable. I mean, it's kind of ironic because you can sit there and make jokes about it, that it was unbelievable. But I mean, how did that all come about? And how quick? I mean, for you guys put the band together really quick. You got your thrift store synthesizer and everything. You put all this together pretty quick, correct? And
Well,
then,
absolutely. Yeah,
and
I mean, we because I'd been in a band for like 8 years before that, and like struggled and struggled and struggled, and had two record deals and never sold a record. And then something happened when I met James and the other guys in EMF, and maybe I'd made all my mistakes, and we had great chemistry, and we just had this sort of idea. Talking of communal intent, we all sort of had a sense of what it was going to be, the guitars and the synths and the break beats and and it was just a great moment, and we were having fun, we were enjoying life and making music, and it just all came together. Yeah, and that song particularly, I just came up with that riding my bike through the park, humming to myself, bitter about my ex-girlfriend, and just this idea of unbelievable, like you might, what you say might not be the truth, and also that you're amazing was such a I loved that interplay in that word, and bang out it came just like that. Went to the rehearsal that night, played it, and 6 months later we have a record deal. A year later it's a hit in the UK. Year and a half later it's a number one in the US, and it's just you couldn't have hoped for anything better.
well, and to be honest, I was talking to one of my friends who is a millennial, and she's like, "So how's the podcast?" And I'm like, "It's going well." And I'm interviewing somebody from EMF. Who's that? You know the song "Unbelievable"? Oh yeah, okay, that's so cool. No
Exactly.
offense to no offense to you, but it's like there's that touch point where you all I have to do is mention that, and yes.
Yeah, everyone knows that song. It's just, it's somehow. I remember after the craziness of those those early years, some friends and I went off to the Amazon jungle to escape the madness, and it got all too much, and we went, flew to Ecuador, went to Taina, which is on the edge of the Amazon, went deep into the Amazon with a guide, and just came across this little shack in the middle of the Amazon in some little shopping place. And guess what was playing in the shack?
And you're just like, I can't
And
get away.
I can't get away. But also, it's, hey, listen, I mean, how wonderful that
Hmm.
it's reached so far.
So what was it like going into the Amazon? Not many
Ah,
people
that was
do.
right. I mean, it was such a wonderful trip. And our guy, Faustus, our guide, uh he had like a machete. We stayed in this little hut, and we went for a walk in the jungle with a machete. And if he wasn't there, and we'd taken a step off the path, you would have been totally lost. It's green everywhere, and 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 it's properly rural, the depths of miles from civilization, and it was wonderful. But I do remember at night, if you go into the toilet at night was very scary, because the toilet was like a cabin away from the hut, and the hut was raised on stilts, and so you'd wake up and there were lots of weird noises, and then you'd sort of clamber down the ladder, and you'd have to walk into the jungle, and you'd have a torch, and then all these little bugs were flying around, and these weird noises. It's like it definitely is a strange place.
It would definitely, it gives Welcome to the Jungle a whole different meaning for you. And I mean,
Oh,
I,
don't you love Guns N' Roses?
oh yeah, but I mean, I can only imagine seeing the sky. Of course, you have a lot of vegetation, but being out there around all that nature, even though there's scary moments, it's also got to be awe-inspiring and breathtaking.
Yeah, it's truly wonderful. And we come from a place in the far west of the United Kingdom, called the Forest of Dean, which is a forest, and it was really lovely growing up around there in the green. And one of the things we did as a band was we'd go out and play music in the forest, have raves in the forest, and there's lakes. We go swimming in the lakes at night, and it's really wonderful sort of to exist in that sort of space. You have a sort of freedom to it. It's lovely, and you can exist in your own world. And I love London. I live in London now, but sometimes I feel like we're sort of hemmed in here, not just physically, but like with all the cultural things that you should be doing and that are happening now. Whereas the freedom of being in nature, and especially stunning nature, and the openness is is a wonderful thing creatively. And James, now the singer, he no longer lives in the Forest of Dean, but he lives in the Yorkshire Dales, which is in the north. And I don't know whether you've ever seen All Creatures Great and Small. It's a TV series about a vet that's set in the Yorkshire Dales, but they're the most beautiful rolling hills with sheep. It's bucolic. It's beautiful, and that in a similar way, I think he's recreated what he had when he was younger. And we go up there and we write, and
Nice.
that's a beautiful thing.
And sometimes, you were talking about the fact that you went from being, having this whole crush of fame, for lack of a better, because you didn't actually say fame, but that's kind of what it sounds like. You were having this crush of fame, crush of just this whirlwind. And I have to give you kudos because there's a lot of musicians that would have just stuck with the trappings and kept pushing and maybe gotten into trouble. But it's like stepping away and going and grounding yourself and finding yourself and finding reality, because there's a certain point when fame is not real.
Yeah. You know what? That's very relevant for us because sadly, Zach, our bass player, died of a drugs overdose in 2002, and I think I think that sort of I worry that was part of the whole thing. You know, I wonder whether because he was 18 when we had all that success, and I wonder whether being part of that world contributed to that, and he'd always he had a slightly troubled home life, and yeah, I don't know what to say, but I think maybe just the madness of all that contributed some way to his death. And after you know after the sort of after that, and I remember James saying, I go out on a Friday night in Camden in London, and I come back on a Monday morning, and I've got to stop it. And that's when he moved to the Yorkshire Dales. He went out there, and I think and for that, tried to find that freedom and peace, and because it does get too much, and it's very sad. There are way too many casualties of young fame, and I've got some friends in the football world, and they have such a duty of care to their players, because I guess because they have to be physically fit
Yeah.
to play, and there's so much money riding on them. But the music world doesn't seem to do that. There doesn't seem to be any duty of care to the people. They're just like milk them while they're hot, and damned with the consequences.
And it, and then, you touched on something, and that's the fact that a troubled home life. And I think in a lot of cases, especially when you look at now, we have the social media, how the younger generation is clamoring to get the clicks and the likes and be known and everything. And I think part of this comes from when you have a troubled home life, you want that attention. You think that that attention and being famous is going to fix you. And the problem is that out external factors can't fix you. And
Um,
and I think even like the opioid epidemic we had here, I think it's just everybody's looking for a quick fix.
mm,
And I don't want to be in pain. I don't want to deal with it. Just give me something to fix me. And at a certain point, that comes back to haunt you, whether it's addiction or
Do you think that's a particularly American thing? I mean, I lived in the US for a couple of years and worked at Epic Records and got very stressed. And when I was stressed, I went to see a doctor, and he's just like, "You wrote me a prescription for drugs, that and and I took those drugs, and I was like a zombie, and I'm like, I've got to find another way to deal with this." And thankfully, a friend of mine recommended mindfulness meditation, and I found a great teacher in New York, so I found a more holistic way to deal with it. But just the speed with which that doctor wrote me those it's just like, oh, there's a pill for it, here, I'll take the pill.
I
And
do
I
think,
think that's
go ahead.
no, yeah, carry on, that's it.
I do think it's an American thing because, now we have all the drug ads. And I have a friend who's a podiatrist, and she tells me one day when one of the drugs was on a football game, the Super Bowl. It was on the Super Bowl, and by Monday, so Sunday, the Super Bowl, Monday, they were having calls for this drug that wasn't even on the market yet. And if you got a script, it was going to be $500 a pop.
Whoa.
In my own experience, so my late husband and I had gotten in a car accident. He went to an orthopedist. The orthopedist prescribed, I don't even know how many. All I remember is when we picked up the drugs, he had 3 bottles of Vicodin and another 2 bottles of Flexeril.
Wow.
When I went to a pain management doctor because I had a back injury, the pain management doctor's like, okay, well, I need you to take 3 Vicodin a day and 2 Flexeril a day. And I knew from prior experience, if I took 1 Flexeril, it would screw me up for 2.5 days. So I'm thinking to myself, and this is where the like you, I have to come up with an idea on how to take care of myself. So I was just like, no, I will figure out a way. I will live with the pain because at a certain point, being bedridden and drooling does not sound like quality of life. I would rather
Absolutely
have
not.
quantity of life than quality of life. So I think they don't do it so much now, but I mean, because I worked in insurance for a while and I heard stories of people getting in a car accident and then they would go to the ER just to get pain medication. They don't do that anymore. But for a long time, it was just here you go. And the doctor, who was a surgeon at the time when my husband had that accident, eventually left the practice.
Wow.
So, we had this big opioid crisis. It's tuned down. And I even had one guy when I was working in insurance call me saying I needed to settle his claim because he was taking 8 Vicodin a day.
Whoa.
Sir, you may have a problem.
That's the truth. That's
Because
the
how
truth.
do you function like that? And not
Yeah.
that we wanted to go here, but that's the thing about the show. We go wherever. And
Well, hey.
but I
Well,
think, go ahead.
I was going to say, well, it's great to hear you say we had an opioid epidemic. Is there some sense that it's easing, things are getting better?
I think it's cracked down, but I mean, there's some people that have some, Portland has legalized fentanyl. Do I agree with that? Not necessarily, but I mean, the problem is, and it's going to go back to this. Sometimes pain is not a physical thing. I'm not disputing pain, but sometimes it's a mental thing. Sometimes you hurt so bad mentally, or there's something else wrong with you.
Mm,
You're anemic or something that can create pain in your body. And unfortunately, our medical profession doesn't necessarily want to treat everything. They don't want to
mm,
investigate. They will just give you a pill. So, yes, we've
yeah,
gotten away from it. We don't give you as many pills, but we'll still give you a pill. Oh, you're sad, you're depressed. We have a pill for that. We're not going to work through your problems. We have a pill for that. And I
yeah,
think that's just masking. It's not actually helping. So I
yeah,
don't know about over there, but yes, when you go to a doctor here, they ask you all these depression questions and then they can prescribe stuff to you. Me personally, I have a
yes,
therapist. I have a therapist and I have talked through all the stuff that I've gone through
yeah,
because a drug is only going to do so much and it's
yeah.
not going to get to the root.
Then you got to find other ways to treat it, like going,
Meditation.
like good stuff, meditation,
Mm-hmm.
music,
Mm-hmm.
and you see what I did there? See how I turned
Yes,
that
nice
around?
segue. And I was going to say, and being creative, because even even in like my darkest times, and I'm sure in your times you've written songs. For me, I've written passages that may never be put in a book, but I've gotten things out by being creative.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, yeah, me and most people my age have got back problems, and but when I'm uh writing music, I forget all about it. It's the most wonderful thing. Or play it on stage. I get on stage and all of a sudden I'm like 19 again, and I'm jumping around playing my guitar. And I think adrenaline is what you need to be able to get in a
Yes.
pill form. That's what you need. Creativity. But go do something creative, and I think that's one of the greatest things, right? Hey, occupying. What you were saying about being troubled by things. It's like the greatest form of meditation to imagine things and create something out of your imaginings. I think that's the best sort of therapy, and
And
certainly
it,
for me.
well, and it helps you heal. It helps you reframe things. It helps you refocus on things. And maybe that moment that was so helpless becomes better,
Yeah, yeah, it's the
and you
truth.
have hope.
Yeah, yeah. Hope. Yeah, and you know what? You're right. To be a creative, you have to be totally glass half full. Because like, especially as a musician, the chance of making it work is so slim. You've got to sort of believe beyond hope that you're going to do something. And 14-year-old me I heard punk rock, and I'm like, oh my God, those guys. It's not. They don't have to play. You don't have to be a virtuoso musician. You can just get some guitar and play some chords and be in a band and like be famous and make music, and people will jump around and love it. And I think I'm still that 14-year-old kid because that hope that it gives you every day, like, oh, I'm going to write a song, and it could be another unbelievable. It could be. Although 30 years later, I think I've given up trying to write another unbelievable.
I talked to somebody from the Vapors. I can't remember, Michael from the Vape, or no, Steve Smith from the Vapors, and he was saying
Ah,
the one thing is he's happy just to be able to be doing this still. It
yeah,
doesn't, it's about the enjoyment of being able to perform still and to write music. It doesn't have to be a number one hit. It doesn't have to have all the fame. It's just about doing it and enjoying it.
that is the truth. That's the truth. And something I didn't understand when back in the day when Unbelievable was a hit is I sort of had this misconception that pop music's like hit music was disposable, that somebody would like buy that record and then forget about it and move on to the next one. But it's not. It goes into people's hearts. It becomes part of their lives. And those people that were listening to us 35 years ago are still listening to us now. People come and we all on stage and off relive a great moment, and long may that continue.
Well, and I wanted to say I loved your the press photo because it's like you're willing to make fun of yourselves. You're not taking yourself so seriously.
It's rock and roll. Come on. It's like
Oh, but come on, there's some people out there that are just even as they've aged, they're kind of I'm me, this is it, and they're still taking themselves way too seriously.
Yeah, that may be true, right? That may be true. But I tell you what, I watched the other day was Slipknot on, was it on David Letterman or something, one of those shows, or Jimmy Kimmel or something. And and then they were all masked on, heads down, like, and I'm thinking that's really funny. That's like it's really, and I love it because they, in a funny way, that's just as rock and roll. They laughing at themselves. They are loving the role play of it all. It's so. That's genius. I think that's what a brilliant, funny
Well, when you
thing it
mention
is.
when you mention this for some reason, Motorhead's episode on The Young Ones came to mind with Lemmy just so
Yeah.
hardcore. And it's a comedy show, but he is just so hardcore going for it.
Right. That's a good fit. And that's laughing himself, right? Isn't it?
Hmm.
That's those there is a bit of humor in rock and roll music. You've got to be able to laugh at yourself. That's the joy that you got to have the joy, and
Well,
that's
and I think that's what gives you longevity is if you can find the joy and if you can laugh at yourself at a certain point when you get past that, I'm who I am. I think the truth of the matter is you've come to this point, and I would say, and granted, I am not you, but I would think, you hit this echelon and it's like, yeah, I have the world by the balls. I'm going to do this. Everything's perfect. And then you start going through life and you start experiencing normal things in life and you're still making music, but it comes to a point where you're like, in like the bass player passing, it comes to a whole thing of, what does life really mean for me and where am I
Mm.
going, and does this still bring me joy? And if it still brings me joy, then yeah, I still want to keep doing it. But if it doesn't, then I'm going to walk away. And I think that's an
Exactly.
evolution.
And how lucky are we that we got to do that and get to do it still. It's like it's and it's the doing it and sharing it on whatever level, and I still think to go and see a gig and play a gig with 300 people is still the best place to play a gig. And we played to 50,000 people in our time, and and there's still still club gigs are the best ones. So we're doing a tour this weekend. There are like 500 capacity venues in the UK, just in there's some classic provincial venues in the UK, and we're just doing those, and that those will be amazing. That's going to be really good. Um, and then I think we're good. We're in a really good place. We're a happy band.
But that comes with the wisdom of it. And because I remember, this is 1985. I I was living in Shreveport at the time, and Adam Ant came to town. And I think there was maybe 50 people at this gig, maybe 100 tops. He was ticked off beyond belief. And
Oh,
he didn't,
really?
yeah, because he was a big deal. Goody Two Shoes had been out and
Yeah,
everything else. So he
yeah,
was a young man at that point, and his
yeah.
attitude on stage, he was not pleased. Of course, it also didn't help that he's sitting laying on some stairs and grinding on these stairs, and this girl pounced on him. But it's one of those things though. His whole attitude, you could tell it was just like he was above this.
Yeah,
And I think that happens when you're younger and a musician. You have that bravado, and at a certain point, it's like you
yeah.
realize what's real.
And hey, listen, let's not diss ambition.
Oh no, I'm not. I
No,
didn't mean to. I didn't mean it to come
yeah.
across that way. I'm just saying,
No,
as
I don't know you didn't. It didn't at all. But I think when you're younger, you're probably hungry and desperate to prove yourself. And as you get a little older and wiser, you're like, just take it easy and enjoy the ride.
oh, when I was 17, I was going to be a badass bass player, and I was going to rule the world, and I was going to do this, this, and this. And yeah,
Love that.
I did not do any of that, but that's okay. I did other
Yeah, it's
things.
okay. Yeah,
But I mean, and
it's
I
all part
mean,
of.
but but had I had that drive and that ambition to be a bass player, I would have done it. But I didn't. I just was like,
Yeah,
whatever. But so I want to revisit something else. I read, or should I say, someone told me that you worked on a Broadway play.
I did. I actually did. Yeah, I wrote a couple of songs for King Kong.
Okay.
Um, I don't, in 2018, there was a Broadway musical of King Kong, and it had the most incredible King Kong. I mean, the gorilla was awe-inspiring. It was a animatronic um, creation, and it took 14 people to move it.
Oh,
And there was only one theater in New York where they could put it on that was big enough to house it, and uh, and it leant over the audience,
oh
and
wow.
it was it was truly creepy and scary, and it was a wonderful thing, and I was lucky enough to write a couple of songs for it, and it was a introduction to the world of musical theatre for me, which was something I'd always wondered about, and it's something I love uh, fiddling with now. I'm working on some musical theatre things. We're going to have to do the EMF. James and I were talking the other day about doing EMF the musical,
There you go.
and and he's um because he did after EMF, he did James did some teaching, and there's like we've got this great idea where because he said that one day he he started out teaching, and he was in front of a bunch of 14-year-olds, and he's like, how did I get here? And it was just such a great idea for a musical. One where he's singing to millions of people, and then he's there in the classroom like teaching to these 14-year-old kids, and I think there's a lovely contrast in that. And
Oh yeah.
of course we've got the song Children, so that's yeah, the EMF, the jukebox musical EMF, coming to Broadway
There you go.
um some one day,
But I mean,
who knows.
it is an interesting thing when you think about it because I mean, here you are there performing for all these people, and all of a sudden it's like now, and the question is, do the kids know who you are? You know,
Yeah,
if they have no clue, it's like it really puts perspective into your life at that point. Because yes, you're
yeah,
helping kids, but I mean, it's the reverse of the whole Sting thing that Sting went to school and then he became this. Then he became Sting.
yeah, yeah, right. But the funny thing is, yeah, you're right, it is a reverse, because but James is a very reluctant pop star.
Yeah.
He could barely say thanks at the end of a song. And then, as I told you, he's like, I go out on a Friday night, come back on a Monday, and I got to change things. And he had a family, and he settled down, and and he went back to college, and I so credit to him. He wanted to sort of ground his life, and went to teach music, and found himself in front of a classroom of 14-year-olds. But it was so good for him, because it sort of taught him how to hold somebody's attention, how to be direct. And now he's the most amazing front man. I mean, eat your heart out, Bono. James Atkin is coming, and and it's like he's learned how to commune with the audience. And I think EMF are better than they've ever been because of that. Because James is in such a great place, and it's good. It's good for you to get grounded and find out who you are, and not get involved in all that fame BS. It's like it's you've got to. It's an important thing as a person,
Mhm.
for anybody to know who you are, and famous or not. It's just like just be comfortable in your own skin.
Well, and I don't know. I mean, I know exactly what you mean because when I left my last job, I was an insurance claim supervisor. I had worked my way up, and that became even though I was married to somebody, I would pick him up from the train station and I would start talking about my job until we went to bed that night because it was that stressful. Like you were saying about the stress, it was that stressful. It was eating me alive. I'd get up in the morning, take him to the train station, go to work, and it'd be just this vicious cycle. And how I started relaxing was playing Grand Theft Auto. I've never played it since, but at the time,
It's
but
better than a pill. Better than
yeah,
a pill, I guess.
but when I left that job, it was so much part of my identity. I mean, I had the flu and I'm walking through a grocery store and somebody had traipsed lipstick across the floor. And I'm sitting there going, we have to find somebody because that's an accident waiting to happen. Somebody's going to get hurt. There's some liability there. So the insurance brain was still there. I was still identifying so much as this job and not so much as me as a person. And I think that's a part of the problem is we spend so much time trying to excel at a job. It
Yeah,
doesn't matter if it's a famous job or just a regular job. We're trying
yeah,
to excel. We're trying to put food on our family's table. And then what? And what do we have afterwards? Who are we? Who are we at our core? And I think that's
yeah,
part of the reason we're here is to figure that out.
yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And I must say, from my time in New York, I think the Americans, work is super important to Americans. I don't know whether this is true, and I know some Europeans say, the Americans um, live to work and the Europeans work to live. And I think I'm not sure whether that's completely true, because Americans certainly know how to enjoy themselves. But I think and it's probably a reason why America is very successful as a country, because work is very important to people in America. People take it seriously, and and they want to excel, and that's not a bad thing. But I guess the flip side of that is that people become obsessed with it and don't know how to look after themselves, outside of that. And um, and I think that's important. And I think the French have got it right because they stop for lunch for 2 hours and like talk and health wise, they're so much better for that. And I think the English need to do that as well.
And I think part of the problem now too is the fact that besides that, every we have such an economy now. When I was growing up, we had a thing called layaway. So you would buy something, you'd put it away. Credit cards weren't such a big thing. Now we have such an instant gratification in our society that you have to pay that bill. You enjoy the moment you went out to that concert or dinner or whatever. Now you have these credit card bills. Now you have this interest rate that's really crazy, and now you have to pay it and you have to keep working. So it's just a vicious cycle. Where the
Yeah,
layaway thing was like, okay, well, I will get it after it's paid off and or paying on time. But yeah, and there was no interest. There was not the there was not this extra
yeah,
payment except maybe
right.
like a $5 fee. So yeah,
Oh,
now it's
explain the
like,
layaway to me. So I don't know what layaway is.
okay,
So
so
you pay
layaway,
for it in parts and then you
right.
get it at the end.
Right.
Yeah,
So like
right,
when I was
right.
when I was
Yeah,
in high school, I wanted to get a wardrobe because, my mom, I didn't want to wear my mom's hand-me-downs anymore and I wanted to be cool because it's the 80s. And so I went to a store and I got some clothes and I put them on layaway. I put like a deposit down and then an extra $5 for handling. And then I had like X number of months to pay it off and I had to pay every week. Sometimes it was less than a week, sometimes or more than a week, but it depended on where you got your stuff. And then at the end you got all your things and you were free and clear.
right, right.
And
That's
there
good.
was yeah, there was
Like
no
saving. It's
yes.
sort of yeah,
Yes. You had a reason you were saving for something. And yes, sometimes things you would end up changing your mind about, but most times everything was there and you got your stuff and that was it. But
yeah.
we don't have that anymore. And that's okay. I mean, I understand we evolve, but who are we evolving for? If we're creating this
Mm,
interest rate that's going to keep pushing people into this cycle, but we didn't
yeah.
come to here to talk about financial stuff. So, you know, I want to talk about your plaque. You just got a you got a plaque in your home in the hometown of the band for your success.
I do. Do you have plaques in the US?
We have
They are.
memorial plaques, but I've never really seen a lot for uh unless it's, I guess, somebody really notable like their house or something, but most of the time we don't put plaques, just, it
Yeah,
depends.
well, they for living people, right? For
Right,
living.
right.
Maybe it's because we're getting on a bit, and that they know we're. but yeah, they in the UK they're blue plaques. They're all blue, and there's all sorts of famous old people usually. I'm just trying to think. There's a painter called Pierre Mondrian around the corner from me here, and there's a plaque where he used to live, um, and our hometown of Cinderford kindly gave us a plaque a month ago for unbelievable achievements, is written on it, and which is very cute. And I think one of the things James says when we play, he says we are EMF, the original brave ravers from Cinderford in the Forest of Dean, keeping the faith since the 1990s. And I think they felt that because we've always represented where we came from, that we deserve to you know have the plaque. And when it was a wonderful day. We went and met the mayor and the local member of parliament, and they gave us they gave us some mini plaques to put in our house, and we had a whole ceremony and unveiling, and we're going to play a homecoming concert there on July the 12th.
Nice.
um um when we come back from our US tour.
And I was going to say, you're going to be
Oh.
over here starting June 14th.
Yeah, we are West Coast, up
Yes.
and down the West Coast in June. That's gonna be good, right? It's
Hmm.
gonna be it's gonna be hot, right, in June,
Yeah, yeah. Arizona will
even in
definitely be
Portland.
hot. I've been to Portland before. Portland, I don't think is going to be too hot.
Right.
But I haven't been to, I went to Portland in January.
Okay,
But it shouldn't be too bad.
it's good. Yeah,
Portland's nice.
but LA's gonna be hot, isn't it? Vegas is gonna be super hot.
Vegas is going to be
Um,
super hot. Los Angeles time kind of lately is it's hard to say. It's hard to say.
ah,
Hard to say.
and
But
but
I'm
we're
over
looking
it,
forward to it.
as you should, and I'm sure it's going to be good. And I mean, it's an amazing time to be able to tour and get through and play. And Are you worried about any of the visa issues or anything?
I mean, I don't know.
I know.
I mean, yeah, I don't know whether. I mean, it's not like I'm just trying to think whether we've done something. We got involved in a campaign for political truth, but it was bipartisan. It was like, can we please um, have our politicians tell the truth? And then a friend of mine is involved in trying to get legislation through parliaments um, where politicians have to be able to back up what they say with evidence. And it's gone to the first reading in the Welsh Assembly. And
Good.
we let him use the song "You're Unbelievable" for obvious reasons for that campaign. And so there's all sorts of figures in the video of that, including your dear president. And but it's not like we are
Yeah.
singling him out. We are
Yeah.
talking to politics from the left and the right, and it's, as I say, it's non-aligned. It's just all politicians need to be telling the truth. Whether they're going to get offended by that, I don't. Who knows? These are difficult times, and um,
I've said things on this show talking to Vox from the Chameleons that most likely could get me locked up. But that's beside the point. I mean, I would never have imagined in my lifetime that we would be living in the times we are. But here we are.
um, well, good for you for talking about stuff, right? Because I mean, you can't, you feel as you're in a climate where what we're not going to get let into the country if we say stuff. It's
I know.
like
Or
it seems.
I can get kicked out of my own country because I've said something. But yet, we are the truth maker of free speech. It's
Yeah,
like and we're not gonna go here. I just want to say one last thing. It's like I feel like I live in the upside down world because nothing over here makes sense, and you have to, especially with me having cancer, I have to turn the TV off because it didn't make sense when I wasn't going through anything, and now it really doesn't make sense, and
yeah,
there's only so much stress you can deal with.
yeah. Right. Very stressful.
So, are you going to be working on new music? Because I saw you cleaning the studio on Instagram, so I assume that you would most likely be.
Yeah, yeah. So we've got some new things coming through. Um, yeah, we've been trying some new things, and sadly, our longtime producer died um,
Sorry.
a month ago, and Ralph Jezard, who produced Unbelievable and the first two albums, and our latest album, The Beauty and the Chaos, and it was so great to work with him again, and he was so much part of the band, and it's such a great loss. But I think he would have been happy that we, keep going and find somebody to work with, and so we're writing some songs, trying some things, talking to some people, and hopefully, you know, that'll that'll come out before too long.
I want to talk to you a little bit about the fact that, I mean, you've seen the music industry in multi different facets because not only, you had your punk band, you had those record deals before, you had EMF that you've been signed, but then you were an A&R person, and then you were also in charge of a label. How do you see the difference as is in this evolution for you in the music industry? I mean, do you see that the music industry has evolved? Do you see that it's not everything that it's not as glamorous as people make it out to be?
I think the music industry will always be glamorous just because of the craziness and joy of playing music and having the chance to reach so many people. And I still, all those new young artists like Chapel Roan and Olivia Rodrigo that my 9-year-old daughter listens to. I think for her, they're just as exciting as discovering the Sex Pistols was for me. And and my son is obsessed with hardcore techno music, and that's his joy. And he's a bit older; he's 20. Um, so I think at root it's the same thing. What the 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 difference is, I mean, the sad thing is that the streaming services don't pay people. So, back in the day when, I learned my trade, um, I had those two record deals. The record industry sort of invested in me because they saw that my band had potential. And hey, we didn't realize it, but my God, did when I did realize it, did they get a big cut of that? So it was like investment. It was that paid off a big return when you got it. And as it's funny, as I was working in Epic Records in New York in 2009, the whole model for record industries changed because instead of somebody's hunch signing a band, finding a new thing was somebody thinking, oh well, if we develop this could be good. They suddenly started looking at stats because they'd get the data from online and they'd see all these bands starting out. They'd be able to see the one that had the biggest response. And rather than getting in right at the start, they would just write a check for it as it started to work. And as a business model, I understand that because for the record industry, that was, you know, they wouldn't have to spend all that money on things that didn't work. But for creativity,
Yeah.
it wasn't the best thing because then interesting things that didn't necessarily pay off the first time would never been. I mean, like Kate Bush. Kate Bush was signed as a young girl and just be worked away for years and years before Wuthering Heights, and like nobody would do that now because she wouldn't have any online figures. It wouldn't be. She wouldn't have good Spotify, Instagram posts. And so I think that's a shame. I think developing music is now down to the musicians themselves. But then on the other hand, people can do that on Instagram and TikTok but yeah, there seems to be this churn, things coming through all the time, and I don't know. I
You
think
don't
there's some
go ahead.
great things. I went to see somebody called Charlie Cunningham play on Sunday, who's a new English artist. He sort of launched in 2018, and he's amazing. And he's carved his own niche, and he's got great lifting figures, and he's sold out 3,000 seats at the Barbican. And I think there is hope because you can carve your own niche. He put his first record out himself, and it just connected. And so there is hope, I think. Yeah. And we put our own records out now, and they do very well. And there is, that's the flip side of it. Maybe people don't get paid well, but they take more responsibility for their own music, and creatively, that's a good thing.
Well, it's like you said, there's this whole thing of now there's all this music coming out, which then you have the oversaturation of the market. But if you do your due diligence and you continue to keep promoting yourself, then you're going to get somewhere. I mean, for me as a writer, I have people that I've interviewed authors and everything, and I have people that were traditionally published, and now they're like, no, because I've had problems with their uh, publisher saying, well, this is the cover we want, and the cover made no sense to the story, and so they're like, I'm keeping my rights. And yet I
Yeah.
still see so many authors going, I want the traditional published deal. Well, you're still going to have to market yourself because they're not going to market you like they used to, and they're still going to take a cut, and it's you have to look at the bigger picture. While it's great to have a record deal and everything else, if you can do it on your own, isn't that better for you? Because then you retain the most important thing of all, creative control.
That's the truth. Yeah. And I don't think I've ever written great music while I've had a record deal. I mean, EMF's second album being the exception. And there's a lot of pressure to do that after the first one had been so successful. But we wrote Schubert Dip, the first album, with no record deal. We just wrote it out of the joy of our existence. And then, yeah, fair enough, the second album, but it, I think it's really good, and we managed that one. But the new music we put out recently, we've done by ourselves, and everything subsequently. The pressure is not a great thing for creativity, I think.
Mm-mm.
I think or the pressure you put on yourself when you've got to write a hit record. It's like I spent a spell writing hit records, and it became very thankless. it became very difficult trying to churn something out just that's a hit. Things aren't hits because you write them to be a hit. Things are hits because they say something great or they sound great because you love what you do. It's like you sort of have to dissociate yourself from that self-consciousness of writing a record to sell loads of copies, and you got to do it because you love it and because you want to connect to people and say something, and
You have
and
to.
that that is easy to do in isolation, but in your own world with your creative partners. I'm sure the same is with writing.
You
I,
have
I
to.
I guess.
Well, for me, it's like I took acting classes a long time ago, and one thing the acting teacher told me was you have to live in the moment. And when I write, that's what I try to do. I try to live in that moment. And you have to make sure that you're being passionate, because if you're not passionate when you're writing and being honest and real, it's going to come across in the words are not going to connect, just like a song. If you write a song that's just not flowing, it's just kind of okay. That's not going to connect with the audience, and therefore it's not going to work. I mean, one thing, to go back to Unbelievable, it's like that song connects on so many levels because it's fun. It says a lot. There's when you hear it, it immediately changes your mood. And that's the thing. It was pure.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. It,
And
it was
that's
honest,
mm-hmm.
pure and honest, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's why it's stuck around. Yeah.
So what was it like? We talked a little bit about the collaboration with Shakira and Beyonce. What was it like to do that? I mean, what made you decide, okay, this is where I'm going to go now. I'm going to work on collaborating with other artists.
Do you know what? I completely fell into that, Donna. I was working with a friend of mine, Amanda Ghost, and her and I just met someone who was like, "Oh, you should write a song for Beyonce," and we went to see him in his office, and he's like, "Oh, there's someone I want you to meet," and in walks Beyonce and Jay-Z, and we're like, "Whoa!" And they're like, "Oh, we we want you to write a song," and Amanda said, "Oh, well, perhaps we could get to know you and play around with some ideas because that's how we wrote songs at the time. They would take some time and Beyonce, bless her, was like, I'm sorry, I'm way too busy for that. We've got this amazing backing track. It's going to be a duet with Shakira. This backing track had a bit of guitar on it and like some cool beats and some people have tried to write a song on it, but nobody's managed it. And we got the studio book tonight. See what you come up with." And we're like, "Oh," and and we'd never written a song to order like that before. But I think we've written so many songs for so many years that that moment was just right. And Amanda and I went back to the hotel and wrote "Beautiful Liar." Went to the studio that night, played it to them. They loved it. Bang, comes out, in a month, and it's a hit. And it happened so quickly, and it was kind of amazing. And we got excited. And we wrote a bunch more hits, and we were on top of the world. But then that's when it sort of started drying up because it was just like, you know, I think that was a wonderful moment. That was the joy of new things and come up with fresh ideas. And as it became something that you had to do all the time, it became harder.
It
And
became
I
a
think,
it became a
yeah, you're going to
job.
say it became a job. That's
Hmm.
it, like a chore. And I don't know. I love my job, but I love my job because it's a joy, not because it's something I have to do every day. And um, job is not a dirty word, but yeah, in that constant, but it can be, right?
It is, because as a creative, it's like once you once you form that thought that this is a job, it takes part of that pure pleasure out of it. And if it takes the pleasure out of it, then it's like, do I really want to do this?
Yeah, exactly.
Do I want to keep doing this? Um, One other quick question. So when you got the nod that you were nominated for a Grammy, how was that?
Yeah, that's great, right? That's a wonderful moment. Yeah, yeah. Hello. Well, I mean, I love that Grammy. I love that you can say Grammy nominated, can't you? You can say
Hmm.
that.
Hmm. And
That still gives you some
I
kudos,
can
even if you say not Grammy winner. Not that's not.
I can also say
Um,
Golden Globe nominated as well.
and that was lovely. And that going to the Golden Globes was a great thing. But sadly, we got to Golden Globes so excited, sat on our table with our nice clothes on, looking good. And the first award was for the best song, and Bruce Springsteen won it. And I just wish we could have hoped a little long. So we sat through the whole of the awards, like feeling crestfallen, and I wish they could have done it as the last award or something. So at least we'd have had a nice night. But hey, I don't mind losing to Bruce Springsteen.
Well, and at least you got to be there because it's not like, the technical Oscars or whatever where they have a separate award show. So at least you got to be there.
It was glamorous. It was very glamorous. Yeah,
It's always important to look on the bright side of life.
always glass half full.
Yeah.
Always.
Yes. So is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would like to add?
You know what, Donna? I think there's a million. You and I could probably talk all afternoon,
Hmm.
and but I've got another interview in
I
when
know
I
you
see it
do.
in 3 minutes.
That's what I figured. So I thank you so
So
very much, Ian. And
oh, Donna, thank you. Such a pleasure talking to you.
I think it's important that, Ian, when he was talking about his journey, leaving the thing behind and going off into the Amazon. I mean, you're talking night and day, the experience, and what a better way to ground yourself and say, okay, that is all an illusion. Yes, people love me, people adore the music, but it's not real. And I have to kind of move on and see where I'm going. And I think that's one thing that we get trapped in on a daily basis. We get lost in our jobs, we get lost in everything else that we have to do, and we don't take time for ourselves until we have to, until we're forced to. One thing that I've talked about a little bit is, I had that move last year and I knew something was wrong with my health. And it's like, I got to get this move done. I don't have time for that. And even this year was like, okay, so this year I have to get my house situated. I have to be able to unpack my garage. And I haven't been able to do any of it. And unfortunately, I am on week, yeah, it was supposed to be an 18-week journey. And so this week at the end of the week will be my second dose of chemo. And so, yeah, that is where I won't be free from this until mid-August. So, yeah, all the things that I wanted to get done, it's kind of like the universe or whoever is kind of like, sit your ass down. You're not doing anything except this. And I'm glad that I get to do this because it's kind of one of those saving graces where I get to step away. And as we were talking about, like him getting up on stage, me being able to do this it takes my mind off of other things. So I get to function and do things that I want to do. And this is part of that. It's something that brings me joy. Um, and I think that's important because on this journey, there's those days where, you can cry at the drop of a hat and you're like, okay, what's going on? I didn't, but there's a certain mortality to it. This weekend, something we never talk about. We talk about chemo and we talk about the fact that you're going to lose your hair. Okay. I've been told that by doctors. I've been told that by nurses. I've been told that in my chemo class. The thing they don't tell you is that when you go to lose your hair, your head feels like somebody smashed it and like you hit your head on a door or a car door or something as you were getting out of the car. It's that feeling, and you wake up in the middle of the night and your head's hurting, and it's like, okay, what's that about? Because you didn't hit your head, you've been in bed. Well, the truth of the matter is your hair follicles apparently decide to go, hey, we're going to let you lose your hair now, or hey, your hair's coming back, we're giving you a warning. But nobody tells you that. Just like nobody tells you how, all these other little things that come up that your feet may itch or that you're going to have these pains and you're not going to know how to deal with them. Nobody tells you about those things. They just tell you you're going to lose your hair. But chemo is so much more. So, kind of what we're talking about there is like you have to find something else that's going to detract your mind from those things because it's one of those things where you have I can't I yes, I'm a cancer patient. Yes, I'm a chemo patient, but that's not all that I am. I'm more than that. And I think that applies with our jobs, it applies with our families. And I talked a long time ago when this show first started about labels. And I can, I gave him some labels when the Grammy nominated, the Golden Globe nominated, but that's not all who Ian is. Ian is a bigger person. He's played guitar, he played keyboards. His dad taught him how to play classical guitar. So it was always part of him. And I didn't really explore that because we explored other things. Music is part of his life, but he's also done other things. And he has a family and he has kids, and there's so much more to us than just those labels that we put upon ourselves. You know, we talked a long time ago about the word widow. I hate that word because why do I need to be a widow? I'm single again. And I think that's one of those things. It's just like we're going to put this label. So for statisticians, of course, but what does it really matter? I love somebody and they left. They passed. It should not matter. Just like it shouldn't matter, in 10 years from now, if I'm still here, that I was a cancer patient. Sure, my medical records it will, but ultimately, is it who I am? It's part of my journey, but I don't have to label myself that way. So, when you look at back to Ian, when you look at the bigger picture of how he created the song and it went to number one, and it still holds true today. People still listen to that song. And I'm sure one thing I didn't mention was I'm sure it must be an amazing experience when he steps on that stage and they start into that. The reaction of the crowd is worth everything because it's something nostalgic. It's something that still to this day binds us and connects us because we all know that song. As I said about my friend, I don't, who's that? Yeah. Of course, if you're listening to this, there's a good chance you already knew who he was. But I just think that try not to stick to those labels. Don't put a label on yourself because it doesn't always apply. And I think, especially like right now where we are politically in this country, we are trying to, I don't want to say tear us apart, but there's a battle because of the way politics are, because you voted for somebody or you are a certain party. And the fact of the matter is, it's all propaganda. And we really need to just start looking at loving everybody and caring about people and not so much about the almighty dollar. Because ultimately, what it comes down to is that money is not going to last. It's not always going to be there. And even if you have money, there's still problems. We need to come at compassion and love and creativity and find ways to get along and find better ways to take care of one another and to support one another and to be there and be connected and not live on a hamster wheel that is only adding to our stress and our heart and not making us happy. So I hope that you guys can find compassion in your life, compassion in your day, find joy and creativity, and find your happiness. Spark your joy because something tells me that it might be an unbelievable ride if you actually connect with your life the way you really want to. So be willing to take a few risks. Nothing illegal, mind you, but if you ever wanted to paint, pick up a paintbrush, pick up some finger paints and go to town. Do something that's going to allow you to be creative to release that stress. And I'm not gonna, I would say get a coloring book, but don't get an adult coloring book. Go over to the dollar store, pick up a kid's coloring book and some crayons and just relax because you're going to connect with that inner child of yours. And that's going to actually give you a chance to find some happiness. So, on that note, I'd like to thank Ian for coming on the show. If you want to check out their tour in the United States and the West Coast starts June 14th. I will have a link on the show notes for you to check that out, their website, and you can find their tickets there. Also, I'd like to thank Fast Susie for the intro and outro music. I really do appreciate that. And I'd like to thank you, the listener, for tuning in, whether it be morning, noon, or night. I really, really do appreciate you tuning in. And I'll catch you next time, guys. Bye.